We have got one more demonstration lined up. I see Kirk and the bullpen, and he's going to do something with 3408 CA finish tonight, folks. Kirk, are you set, ready to go?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Well, you're on the spotlight, and we hear you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting me have a demonstration. I appreciate that. You want to see just the 3408? I have a little bit of show for the 900 as well, because there's people, I constantly see people posting that they have trouble using CA glue to glue pen tubes in. I have a 7mm tube. It's been drilled out. The wonders of the 900 is because it's so slow, it will allow you to put your glue on, let it spin around, spin it in and out of the tube a couple different times, make sure everything's covered. Once you feel you have everything covered, you can push it in. I use a big fat pencil to push it the rest of the way in.
I was going to say you're below the screen, below the camera.
I'm sorry. I got to move my camera.
There you go. Now we got you.
You're good there.
And then just set it off to the side and let it dry like you would any other pen tube. It just gives you more.
How long does the 900 take to dry?
The 900 is about 50 seconds to dry.
Okay.
So it's going to give you a ton of time to get that part of the job done. I have yet to stick a pen tube myself. I don't do a lot of pens, but it makes it a whole lot easier to use. Now we'll go on to the 3408, which is a very popular one. Super simple finish to use. We'll start out with the simplest thing there is to finish, would be a bottle stopper. I'm going to move my camera. I had it zoomed in too far. All right. So this is a bottle stopper. The stopper on this particular one will actually go up inside. You can use just a plain piece of paper towel, or I like to put a piece of polyester felt on the inside of the paper towel. It's going to act as a little reservoir for you. So I just roll it up in the paper towel, fold it over a little bit. Now I have a reservoir. It's also going to help to keep some of it off of your fingers, make life a little bit easier there. You could put it on by hand without the lathe spinning. If you can spin your lathe at, say, 300 RPMs or less, would be the easiest way. We're going to soak our paper towel down. We're going to put it on the end because we can't dribble it on the end. This also has dye on those bands, so we want to be a little bit careful on there that we don't press too hard. But we can just dribble it on across the piece, work it in with our paper towel. As you can see, it's pulling some of the black back off, but it's not going to pull, it shouldn't pull enough of it off that it will cause you any real major problems. You got to put it on, it's saturated to piece. We can take the same paper towel and clean our tip of our glue bottle off because we have 40 seconds to get the job done. So there's no real big hurry. The wood needs to be dry to use the product. So we can stop it at that point and look over things and make sure we don't have any places that are super dry looking. If we do, we'll just go back over it some more. Took a dry paper towel. As you can see, I'm still pulling some of the black off, which is okay. It's sitting on the surface right there. So I'm going to wipe the whole thing down with the dry paper towel.
How many seconds do you say you have to do that?
Yeah, 40 seconds time.
Okay.
Or more. As long as you keep it plenty wet, it does not set up on you. When it starts to set up, you'll feel your paper towel dragging. which at that point you need to get the excess off, because all you want is what's below the surface. I'm gonna go back 18 to 24 inches if you want to use Accelerator. If you don't want to use Accelerator, you don't need to. You can just come back in 2 or 3 minutes and it will be set up. But in this case, we're going to use 1 or 2 squirts of Accelerator at a distance. Don't spray your Accelerator up close and personal, like you see a lot of people do. So that's one bottle stopper done. I have several things for you to see. We're going to start out with the simplest, and then we'll come back and buff them all at one time. I have a gnome hat. Once again, it's colored. The dyes I use is the Chestnut spirit stains, which are alcohol based. The only thing with the Chestnut products is they have a little bit of shellac in them as a binder, which can cause you a problem with CA glues, because CA doesn't necessarily play well with the shellac. It seals the wood a little bit too much. So what I do to get around that, this piece, once it was all dyed, I will go back with some denatured alcohol. Well, it's still sort of wet, and I will rub it down with the denatured alcohol and make sure that I have a dull surface when I'm done. That way all the shellac is gone. But we're basically going to rinse and repeat the same process I just did. This time you got to be a little bit more careful because of the reds and the greens. So we can hit the red a little bit. I'm going to flip my paper towel around so that I don't spread the red out. We'll go back and we'll hit the green, and we're putting plenty on. Don't be shy with it. You want it to soak into the wood. Once again, it's totally saturated. We're going to give it 30 seconds or so to soak in, and you will start to see it actually dry out on its own. Actually, we could have used a little bit more here on the end grain because it got dry. So I'm going to go back over that little bit of end grain right there and make sure it's totally covered and sealed. Once again, I'm going to stop and I'm going to wipe off the excess. As you can see, I'm using the entire length of the paper towel so that I don't spread the colors from one to the other, because the CA does reactivate the dye, as you can see by the paper towel. So once again, we're going to make it dry. We're going to wipe off the excess, because you don't want any of it to sit on the surface. It will not dry smooth that way. You want what's soaked into the wood, which is a lot. As you see how much I put on, that's all the more I got back off. So it does a really nice job, a very simple job on a lot of things. So that's our piece number 2 ready to go. Now we'll move over to a bowl, which everybody understands that you can do it on something small, but it's when you get to something a little bit more of size that people get really nervous.
I've got a quick question.
Fire away.
What kind of size were you using that would come off on the CA? Why didn't you seal the color first?
Run that by me again.
Why did you not seal the color on, before applying the CA glue? Put a sealer over it.
Because if you put a sealer over it, the CA will not soak in. If I was to put a coat of, say, shellac, would be the sanding sealer I would use on things, the shellac will not stick to it. Or the CA, what you're after is the CA to penetrate in the piece of wood. So doing the dyed pieces can be a little bit tricky, especially if you have multiple colors. But it's not really that big of a deal, because you're not going to sit there and rub them back and forth so that they bleed into one another. I mean, it does reactivate it, but it doesn't reactivate it to the point of what it would have been when you first started to use it. So from there, we can go onto a bowl This is a piece of red maple. It does have a little bit of figure to it. It's a natural edge. So we can't spin the natural edge unless you're really, I guess if you were really super brave and didn't like your fingers very well. All I'm going to do with that is basically put it on a jam chuck. And move my camera back just there. Get the whole view. And I've made my little pad again with a piece of polyester felt inside. We're going to take our 3408. We're going to saturate our pad. Like I say, don't be shy. We're going to find the end grain and we're going to rub it in. As you can see on the end grain, it totally disappears in a flash. So we're going to go the whole way around the bowl. I normally start on the outside of the bowl, but you can start wherever you want. I do the outside first. I forgot to put I normally put a piece of wax paper on the inside on that jam chuck. This bowl is not very thin and it's maple, so it's not very porous. If you do this with a more porous piece of wood, like a piece of walnut or something like that, and you get down to that 1/4 inch category or less, it may bleed through to the other side.
Well, that's got to be fun.
It is, because that little blue pad that I use there, that's on there, it's just a real thin foam. But the piece I did, like I say, you learn by mistakes. Well, I did a little piece of walnut crotch, and it was at 1/4 inch, and it went straight through. By the time I sprayed the little accelerator on it and went to spin it around, it sucked the little pieces of blue padding right off, right into the wood, because it sucked it in as it dried. So then we had little blue specks all over it, which pretty much just about ruined the piece, because it pulled it in enough that I couldn't sand it back out. If we went around this, if you're watching your clock, I'm probably getting real close to the 40 seconds now. It's starting to, there'll be places you won't be able to see it, but I can see it starting to bead up certain places. I'm going to make sure I got around my edge where the natural edge part is, because it has not been glued at all up there. Once again, I clean my tip off. Grab a dry paper towel. Take my dry paper towel and I'm going to rub it in circles. Make sure I get everything covered and saturated. Now I'm drying it off. As you can see, maybe it's easier with the dye. It shows how much I'm pulling off, because I'm not pulling very much of it back off. But there is always a certain amount that wants to sit on the surface, which you need to get off of there. This is a 1-coat application and 1-coat only. If you get the bright idea to say, I want more shine or I want more protection, and go back over this a second time with the same product, it will not cooperate at all. It will sit on the surface and dry like a very well waxed car. And then you will have to sand all them little bubbles off. If you wanted a super high gloss shine, a plastic look shine, then you would go to the 3460, which is a little bit thicker. It's still very thin, but it's thick enough that it will allow you to do things like pens and things of that nature. For this demonstration, we're going to hit it with Accelerator. Normally, when I do this on my own, I usually don't even use any accelerator. I just walk away for a couple minutes and come back. But I want to be able to grab a hold of this and touch it. It's not sticky to your fingers at this point. And I have dropped one into the sawdust that's normally at my feet. And believe it or not, all I did was take a paper towel and wiped it off, because it's not sticky enough at that point the sawdust didn't stick to it. So now we can go do the inside. We're going to do the inside the same way. Get another little piece of felt. Make another little pad. And we'll go ahead and do the inside.
Kirk, I'll interrupt you 1 second, sir. We are going to do some voting on some propositions that came up today. And right now, the voting option on the screen is not responding. So members, stick with us. We will get it repaired and go back to it. Kirk, pardon the interruption.
That's fine.
Eddie, I accidentally popped it off and I turned it off. That was an accidental thing. I'm not counting that vote.
Okay. Go ahead. Kirk, go ahead, please.
Okay, so we can go to the inside. I don't have a camera right where it should be. So if we go to the inside, we're basically going to rinse and repeat. We're going to do the inside. We're going to try and hit the end grain first because it's going to soak the most amount in. The inside will take less material to get it to saturation point because the outside is sealed. There's no air going to be able to come through to suck the material in. So we're going to go around our little circles. We're going to soak it in. You see I didn't get it dusted off real well. It's not a big deal. It's not going to hurt you because it's going to constantly pull more dust and dirt out of the grain anyhow. These pieces have been sanded through 400 grit paper, and then I do the 800 grit random orbit. I think you'll find if Mark Soleil has ever done any demonstrations for you, he talks a lot about that using the 800 as in a random orbit. It does work extremely well, I think. If you forget it, you'll find out you forgot it because it'll show up, especially if you dye something. It will show every line, every radial line that you have in the piece. So there's our inside of our bowl cleaned up, or yeah, finished up. Same deal. We're going to take our paper towel. We're going to dry off the excess. The whole time you're drying off the excess, you're moving some around in case there's a place that's a little light on the finish. That's it. If you want to go back and do the natural edge, you almost need to use a little bit of a brush or a little dabbing motion. You got to watch there because you definitely don't want to use something that's going to leave any lint behind. But a normal paper towel usually will work very, very well for you. There's where I started. You can see the difference in the color. Like I say, there's not a whole lot of material comes back off of it. You can hit that with just a little bit of Accelerator. Get the bottle of glue out of the line of fire, of course, as it will set it up in the bottle.
You only do that one time, Kirk.
Yeah. So there's our inside finished. I missed some on the bottom, or else it's some Accelerator. I do have a couple little lumps and bumps in the bottom. I'm going to let that set up while I do the two last things with it. And then I'll come back and I'll show you that it's very easy to sand off. It will clog up sandpaper because it's plastic. It is liquid plastic. The last one we have, we're just going to do the inside of it. And it should tell me, it should show us. This is a piece of sycamore. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick. It also has a crack up here that it should seal the crack to go with it. But more importantly, when I go putting this on, it probably will come out the other side. It may make a liar out of me, but it usually does whenever you're trying to do something and show somebody that it can do it, then it won't. It is not thin. It is not that thin down here where the chuck is at. That is the other thing you have to be concerned about is sticking things fast with the product. Because since it's set so slow and it's so thin, it has a chance to go in places you can't even imagine. Vacuum chuck on using this to put it on is out of the question. It would go right straight. If you pulled a vacuum on a piece, I guarantee it will come right out the other side and it'll be stuck fast to your vacuum chuck. Which then you got a real problem, depending on what vacuum chuck. I have a friend of mine that told me that experience, and he lived it firsthand. He got the bright idea because he does a lot of Calabash Bowls. So that's his easiest way of getting a hold of things, to do things on it. So yeah, it went right straight through. Grabbed a hold of the vacuum chuck. He was fortunate enough to get it off before the glue had a chance to set up and dry. But nonetheless, it went right straight through. And this is
Not a good day.
Not a good day. And like I say, I had that with the jam chuck. I never really gave it a thought, you know, because it was, yeah, it's not like this. It wasn't an 1/8 of an inch thick, but it found a place where the end grain went straight through. Which it's going straight through on this piece right here. You see the dark little spots there? That's end grain. There's dark spots appearing down there. There's dark spots appearing up there. If you do really thin bowls and you want to finish it with this, pick a side, and I would pick the inside to do first, like I'm doing here, because those little spots may end up as little bumps. So it's a little easier to sand those little bumps off on the outside. And just do one side at a time and let it set up. Give it a half an hour or something like that to set up. So that if you can run your finger over them and you can feel them, just go back with just a little bit of 800 grit paper and lightly sand all those little bumps off, and then you'll be fine. Then everything should be sealed on the inside. Same way with our crack that we had on the inside. It's thin enough and slow enough. It actually has filled that crack in and should repair that crack. It should keep that crack together. Put it that way. Once again, we're going to wipe off the excess, which there won't be much on that one, because the thinner you go, the faster it absorbs in. And there again, depending on the wood, I mean, sycamore is very porous. So even if I take my paper towel and rub over that, you can see it's spreading it out because there's little bumps of that sticking up. Or maybe you can see it. Like I say, at that point, I will let that set up, completely set up. The total cure time on this stuff is 24 hours. That means in 24 hours from now, it's going to be as hard as it'll ever be. At that point, if I'm not doing this in this type of setting, I will put this stuff on and I will wait till tomorrow or the next day or the day after, whenever I get back to it, to buff it. You will get a little bit better shine out of it when you do it that way. We're not going to buff that one, so I'm not even going to bother with it. One other thing that I have to show you. Everybody has things that crack. Actually, today I couldn't find anything that actually had a crack in it. But I have this bowl, the Calabash Bowl. I've taken a piece of painter's tape, which hopefully will be secure enough to hold it, because where this knot cracked, it went the whole way through. And if you can see it on the camera, there's like a dark ring out around here. That's actually shellac. I put a little bit of shellac because this thing has not been sanded. Normally when you run into cracks, the piece hasn't even been turned a second time. So it doesn't really matter if you get some out over anywhere. But I'm going to switch to the next level up in thickness. And we went from 5 centipoids to 45 centipoids. This is a 3460. This is what most of the pen turners would use to finish pens with. what I have in my trusty little cup is a little bit of mica powder. I do some casting, so I have a wide range of it. You can get mica powder at Hobby Lobby and all them places in little amounts. This is one of the things that the CA companies are kind of lacking in. Of course, I don't know if you can get it. I haven't tried it with any of the fast setting stuff, but there again, at the 3460, we're talking about 50 seconds worth of time delay. So I'm going to put a nice generous amount in there. And I'm going to mix it around, mix up the mica powder in it. Like I said, we got 50 seconds to get this done, so there's no real big hurry. So now we have a lovely purple shade. And we can go over here, especially with these little paper Dixie cups, we can get that down to a tiny little spot. Now, first things first. Accelerator and filling your cracks. Spray it first. There I will spray it fairly up close and personal. I want the accelerator to go down in that crack. I can wipe off what little bit I had on the surface, but I want this to cure from the bottom up rather than the top down. And it will. It may or may not show us on the camera, but when you do this otherwise, give it a nice big puddle up there, see if we can show it. Usually when it starts to set up, depending on what color it is, you'll actually see this thing here like churning like butter because it's getting hot. But it's already setting up. If we wanted to, we could wipe off the excess, because that will definitely clog up a piece of sandpaper in a hurry. That should have filled up our hole, our complete hole. Actually looks like there's a little bit of a pothole in there that didn't fill up. We have a little bit left. We can get it in there. This is a pretty big, this is fairly wide crack to fill with CA, but it can be done. If you're worried about it, then you could actually go back and hit the top with the accelerator so that it skims over. And if we did everything fairly right, it should have came through the bottom. And that should be, it's not totally set up at this point. I could have left the tape on a little bit longer.
Would you recommend squirting it with the accelerator from the bottom of the hole prior to dumping in the CA on the crack on top?
I could have, but I won't guarantee you that the problem there is that the tape might not stick to it, which would be a bigger problem than, say, like there, if that's not suitable at that point, then we could go back and fill a little bit from the bottom, and it's going to do the same thing for us, and it should be totally filled. The CA glue is nothing more than liquid plastic, so it is a little hard on sandpaper as far as to sand it off, but the end result is to me, it's just too easy compared to your typical finishes that you're going to have to put 3 or 4 coats on, try and keep everything nice and neat and dry. Got one more little piece to put CA on, and then we'll go on to buffing. I don't want to keep you guys too long.
We're gonna run out of time here in a few moments, sir.
Okay, well, I won't do the last piece. We'll just go to buffing. Thread this back on there so I don't send it flying. Got out of there.
If it goes flying, we can make you part of the Birdwood Club.
What's that?
If it goes flying, we can put you in the Birdwood Club.
Yeah. I'm going to use a Beal buffing system. I'm going to use Vonax and Carnauba wax on the stuff. First will be the Vonax. We got to put our drawbar in. Do not do this without the drawbar. It can have very unwelcome results if you do. You find a buffing wheel flying across the floor. Buffing speed is 1700 RPMs for the Vonax. As you were talking with the guy before, I normally, as you can see, this has a little bit of a goldish color to it. That's the Vonax from the last time buffing. I just take a piece of 120 grit paper and I clean it off. You get all the gunk off and now it's back to being white. I will put my face shield on it for this because it throws all the little furry things at you. And then we'll give it a brush. At this point, we're certainly not going to press real hard because the CA is not totally set up. It won't be set up for 24 hours. It won't be hard for 24 hours. I won't say shut up, but if you're in a hurry, like we are right here, we're going to hit it with a buffing wheel. A little bit goes a long way. Like the gentleman was talking about the white diamond. If you put too much of it on, like this has burned, those lines are burning with the pyrography pen. So I don't really want to fill them up with buffing compound. I leave it on the mandrel because it's easier to hold on to. Go in multiple directions. That way we don't introduce any more lines. This particular bottle stopper has not been finished on the inside, so I will have to do that at a later date. I just made this one this afternoon. That's pretty much all there is to it as far as that goes. We will put a coat of Carnauba wax over top of that yet. But while we're at it, we'll go back and hit this. We'll just hit the outside of this one bowl. The bowls are probably easier to do than the small piece. Okay. And keep our directions going multiple directions. So get the whole way around the bowl. A little bit careful around your natural edge. Not difficult. Go the mark off. Pushing very hard on it, especially at this point, because I don't want to pull up the air to the surface. Get impatient. Say, oh, it's dry enough. And you go in here and really rip into it with a buffing wheel. The heat can pull the glue that's sitting below the surface, not cured. It can pull right back to the surface. Then you'll have a little bump. That's hard to tell whether about the whole way around. So we're going to call that the whole way around for this purpose. So then we'll go to our carnauba wax. We'll drop our speed back to around 900 RPM. We don't want to put carnauba wax on at a high rate of speed. It will leave you streaks because it will melt it. Believe me, take it from me. You melt carnauba wax on a piece with your buffing, it's incredibly hard to get it off. You almost have to use a cabinet scraper or something along those lines to get it back off. You literally scrape it off. Carnauba wax, as you very well know, is very, very hard.
Kirk, I got about 2 minutes left before we got to continue with the business.
Okay, that's fine. We'll just stop right there. So there's our bowl, the bottom of our bowl finished. We would do the same thing on the inside. On the inside, if you're doing non-natural edge bowls, you can use the sanding abrasives, the microfine sanding abrasives, and do the inside rather than buff the inside. The inside of them are a little bit more complicated to do. You have to use them small balls and that, but you know, it's not bad. It's pretty easy.
Very nice. Very nice.
You know, you figure it this way that, you know, that bowl is going to have at tops a half an hour to finish it, ready to put on the shelf to do whatever you do with them, sell them, give them away or whatever.
All right.
That's about it.
Again, Kirk, we wish to thank you